Hello everyone, today we would be interviewing with the one you want, Shubham Jain. Shubham Jain is one of my best friend. I have met him through CP. He started CP after taking a programming class at IIT Bombay and soon became obsessed with it. He ended up qualifying for the World Finals 3 times, and after graduating from IIT Bombay, he went to grad school at Stanford and now works as a software developer at a quant firm in New York. He enjoyed teaching throughout his years. He used to teach for math Olympiads during his undergraduate and was head TA for algorithms in his grad school. In his free time, Subham N likes to read manga, play badminton, write blogs. Often he is thinking about the next thing to get obsessed with it. Hello Subham, welcome to the stream. Would you like to introduce yourself once to the audience, please?
Sure. Hey, I'm Shubham. I like solving puzzles and playing games. They can be like video games, combinatorial games. They can also be sports games. That's why I love badminton. I also recently I've been running more, lots of other stuff. I mostly wanted to do this AMA because Aryan is someone I know for a while. And I thought it's a good idea to, do this with him because he's doing all the hard work and I just have to show up. And B, because I think it's pretty useful to, especially if you want to do something similar, it's pretty useful to talk to people and figure out, what they learned and ask them questions. So I'm always happy to answer questions, and an AMA is a good way to do that. I also noticed in teaching and stuff, students often have many questions, and from there, I realized that asking questions is probably a really good way to learn things. So yeah, that's one skill I'm trying to develop for myself also.
And before we proceed further, a standard disclaimer. Views expressed by guests in their video are their own and they do not represent their employer over here. So with that, let's get started. First question I have, Subham, for you is like, how did you manage to qualify World Finals for the 3 times?
I think what happened was so the rough story is I started doing programming in my undergrad and I thought programming was pretty cool. I had very limited exposure before college. So, if you haven't done programming until college, it's totally possible to do this. I think a lot of it is finding people who are there and or like who are really motivated and trying to practice with them. I was lucky enough to find two teammates who were extremely motivated, and I made a team with them for ICPC because the problem seemed pretty interesting. And we spent a lot of time practicing together. After some point, it turned out that we were all pretty ambitious, and so the only way forward was for each one of us to become a lot better. And after that, it became mostly an individual journey. But I think at least at the start, until getting to 1900 or something on codeforces, I was chatting with people. I also joined a bunch of Discord groups, like the AC server. I don't know if it still exists or if people still post on there, but back when I was very active, I used to post a lot on the AC server, talk to a bunch of people who used to think about problems, and that was also really motivating because people would tell you their favorite problems or the ones that they learned the most from. And also, you would chat with people about their lives, which would be very different from yours because they're from different countries. They have different experiences with programming, with math, with, access to a computer. Maybe they're just doing math and they just got access to a computer. I don't know. Maybe they're like some, really young kid who I remember this one story of this really young kid whose mom told him that, you know what, like programming, these kind of problems seem really fun. Why don't you try them? And this guy just got extremely, extremely good. And I didn't realize this fact after he was teaching me how to do like Fourier transforms correctly, or he was teaching me some things about the Church-Z transform. And it was really impressive to me that, you can meet all kinds of people. You grow faster by discussing problems, you get feedback, and you also spend a lot of time yourself.
The first time I met Subham was on a Facebook group, which we ended up creating to live commentate on ICPC World Finals back then.
Oh, yeah.
And then that group kept on moving for all sorts of post-contact discussion in India. And right now that group is almost dead because no one there does CP anymore. That was the start for it. And since we started with ICPC and you have been to World Finals 3 times. So the first question, what is your most memorable experience while participating in ICPC World Finals?
I think two main memorable moments. There are basically two main memorable moments throughout my CP journey. The first was my first contest win, where we were huge underdogs. There were extremely strong teams participating, but we got the stars aligned, and we were never first throughout the whole contest. But in the final ceremony, like in the final 1 hour, we got to first place, and I think that was just insane because you just don't expect it. It felt like a dream. Like the whole day, I thought it was a dream at that time. The second is that
I remember the first World
uh,
Finals, like first ICPC regional. That was the first time we met in person in the Amritapuri regionals.
oh yeah,
And like also like that was
oh
the time like you won it, but nobody was expecting you to win it and took you seriously, at least for that contest. So like, and I really like underdogs winning.
oh
So like I was really happy for you. Like other team, I believe was from IIT Roorkee that consisted of previous world finalists and all, and like they were the favorites there. And like probably you were
right. There were
continuing.
also other
Oh,
really strong teams.
second most memorable experience.
I wanted to say that you just reminded me that we met for the first time in that competition, and I remember that everyone wanted a party after we won, and so we went to this laser tag place to play laser tag and also get dinner. It was really fun, I think.
And like in
Uh,
retrospect, I don't think we have a photo of laser tag. Like you were asking people around, but we just forgot to take that photo. So like
yeah, it
ICPC
was so much
regionals,
fun.
like I am from IIT Kanpur, not from IIT Bombay, and like that was the reason why ICPC regionals for the first time we met in real life. Memorable experience from ICPC.
During Moscow World Finals, when I landed, I landed at 2 a.m. and I had no internet. I didn't realize that my mobile carrier was didn't work in Russia, and I got a text like in my spotty connection saying your teammates were taken away or something, and I didn't know what that meant. It was really scary, and the shuttle from the airport to the hotel was an hour and a half or something, or maybe an hour. And I remember being like extremely confused and scared because you're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, you don't have mobile internet, and you get a text saying your teammates have been taken away. Yeah, anyways, I reached and it turns out that they tested positive for COVID, and so some people took them away without telling them what they were going away from for because they didn't speak English apparently, but I'm sure it was scarier for them than for me.
And I remember in that World Finals, you
Yeah.
participated in a two-member team because like the third person was still COVID positive during the contest, but the second person was in quarantine and was tested negative on the contest day. Yeah, like looking back in retrospect, like it's really a crazy experience.
Yeah, it
Some
was.
people in the chat were asking like how much math is required for coding. So any comments on that?
This is a hard question and also slightly slightly vague. I think yeah. Wait, I just looked at the chart and I think CP requires a lot of math, but coding doesn't require a lot of math. I think I somewhat agree with that. CP is one of the paths of programming that maybe requires more math than most other paths. So, especially now that I work as a professional rather than as a hobbyist, as I was in college, you kind of realize that there are a lot of parts of systems that don't require that much math, but require you to be really curious, and require you to be good at other things, which I'm maybe not as good as at, but I'm learning. And you don't have to, you shouldn't think that, oh, I don't like math and therefore I can't be good at programming or programming is hard for me as a career. There are a lot of parts that don't involve math. There are a lot of parts that involve math. CP is one of the parts that involves more math than average, I think. But if you are, I think even for any programming job, it's probably worth trying to trying to understand some amount of math because a lot of the programs that you write, you have to make them more efficient and to understand things like complexities and how slow your programs are, how many operations you're doing, you probably want to have some algorithmic basic knowledge.
Okay. I was asking what would be the one advice you could give to a student who has never been part of competitive peer environment like prestigious institute. So I definitely feel smarter people push you for a lot of things.
Right. This is a great question because I feel like most of my growth has come from meeting people who are really, you know, good at what they do and really willing to, I mean, it's very friendly. They're really willing to help you out and discuss problems with you. I think there is one part where being close to someone like physically helps, like being close to these people physically helps. For example, being in an institute. But I think that that shouldn't limit you from learning from people like this. Because at least at my time in IITB, and also during COVID, there weren't that many people who wanted to become extremely good or spend a lot of time doing this, which makes total sense. It's a hobby. Like the hobby just wasn't super popular. And after I left, again, it wasn't that popular anymore. I don't think IITB teams did well at last year's regionals, from what I remember. But the point is, I went online. I joined some Discord groups. I made friends not from the same local region, and I discussed problems with them. So you shouldn't feel restricted in finding people to discuss things with, especially when you're learning a new topic, and all you need in common with someone else is a desire to learn.
And do you miss your IIT Bombay days?
This is a hard question. I think I do miss them somewhat in the sense of, having being free of responsibility and things like that. You just have a lot of time, you have a lot of things to do, and your day is just full of you're never in your room basically. You're always outside the whole day.
Okay,
I guess also because your rooms are not worth being there at or something. Like all the rooms were falling apart back when I was starting out. The ceiling fell down in one of our hotels, or not hostels, sorry. So yeah, that's the kind of rooms we were living in. So you just never want to be in your room, and you're just out the whole day. But yeah, it was very active. I think I do like that now. I have, especially now that I live in New York, I have access to a lot more diversity, a lot more activities. Um, yeah, that's pretty exciting as well. So there's some nostalgia, but also some excitement being in a place where you can meet a lot of different kind of people.
Okay, and after IIT Bombay, you moved to Stanford for the grad school MS. So, like, how much has an MS degree helped you after graduating from IIT Bombay? As in, like, I would like to know about how much is the exposure to research in Stanford as compared to IIT Bombay. Also, could you please discuss about if MS is degree favorable for your career as a quant engineer?
This is a great question, but before I answer this, I want to say I just noticed that Lucas asked a question in chat. Hi, Lucas. Yeah, we should totally catch up sometime. Yeah, he was one of my teammates, and he also lives in New York now. Yeah, we should. I haven't seen him in in 3 months though, because we've just been not in the same city for a while. But anyway, hi. Yeah, the question was about master's programs. I think there are three parts to this question. Part one is it useful for your career? My default answer is okay. Maybe I should. Yeah, my default answer is no. Like I think that my undergrad was pretty good technically, and a master's technically probably I didn't require. So yeah, like completely theoretically, I didn't really require a master's for the job that I wanted to do or something. B, why did I do a master's though? I think there are a couple reasons for this. A, it was during COVID and the jobs I was getting were all remote because, well, everyone was remote and the master's program was in person. The second point is I wanted to try living in different countries and I thought that it was better to go earlier rather than later. So it was really exciting to, move to the US, see how the culture here is. I also interned in Europe before. So I was trying to get like more of a global perspective and figure out where I want to be longer term. And see, I think it's good from a life perspective because you get time to sit back and explore your other interests apart from just technical. I think my master's definitely helped a lot in that. Also, of course, there is the whole visa thing, like it's pretty hard to move. When I say exploring countries, it's pretty hard to move to the US without having a degree here. Plus, I really wanted to teach more, and I got like basically teaching funding throughout my masters. So that was extremely exciting also. Yeah, lots of reasons.
So like your answer to question was like you went to MS because like you wanted to see a different culture over there, and in COVID everything was remote. Probably in and you took MS because you love teaching people, and like that was also reflected when you got 5% bonus as a head TA for algorithm, right? Probably you were the TA course,
Uh,
and in the
I have
next
this.
semester you were the head TA for algorithm course, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. Like basically, to clarify, it was like some top 5% TA thing. It wasn't a 5% bonus. It was like a top 5% TA thing. But I think it was. It's just something I have on my LinkedIn, but it doesn't really mean anything. I think. Yeah. The really important part is that you get to interact with a lot of students, and a lot of these people I interacted with are, like they still talk. We still talk. We still catch up every now and then. Some of them even, some of my co-CAs even work at the same firm, nearby firms. We're good friends now. I'm still in touch with a lot of my students, including from 6 years back, I think, when I did Olympiad teaching in my first year of IITB. I actually met someone when I was in India in December, and she was one of my students from 7 years back. So yeah, like that's really really nice to kind of have in your life. That whole dynamic of having people that you're learning from, because as someone who, I don't even want to say teacher, like I want to say more like lecturer or something. You have this dynamic where you're also learning and getting quizzed by these students, and you also learn from them. So it's pretty fun, I think. Nice.
I mean, like it looks like you logged into your personal computer after quite a long time. Is it true? Like because Zoom was updating
Yeah.
and
I think I I mean, yeah, I after work I try to like not look at screens as far as possible, because I've been realizing that my eyes get dry and stuff. So I'm trying to like read more. You can see a book on my like pillow there. I'm rereading the Percy Jackson series from childhood, and I'm trying to do more outdoor stuff, meeting friends, going out, checking out stuff. So yeah, not
okay.
as much of
Okay,
computer stuff.
continuing with your journey in US, like can you share some advice for higher studies applications, especially to high-end computer science courses in the United States?
Oh, sure. I think probably the best thing to do is maybe I can drop a link for my blog. I wrote a blog on this very specific thing on preparing an application and deciding to go to the US versus taking a job.
I mean, like I can definitely add
Yeah.
it in the same discussion and a comment like once we go there. You can probably reach out to him on Twitter or Discord, like wherever you want. Like I will also add his Twitter
Yeah,
link
you
in the
can.
description. And
Yeah,
like
you can.
so,
You can reach out to me anywhere. Comment on the blog. Like, yeah, anything's fine.
okay, someone was asking, what is your daily routine in United States looks like? Like when do you wake up? When do you go for sleep? And like how do you talk with your father at home? Like because the time zone is
Oh yeah,
almost 12 hours difference, right?
yeah. This is a great question. The last part especially, because that's a real problem. I think my day-to-day life has too much variance, but let's see. Let me tell you what I think my day-to-day life should look like. I wake up around maybe 6:30. I want to say 6:15 or 6:30. Go to the gym for 40 minutes maybe, and come back by 7:20. Get ready for work. Leave around 7:45 and get to work around 8:15. I get breakfast at work, lunch at work, and then leave work maybe around like 6 or 6:30, and then I have time for whatever else I want to do. What do I do after work? So it's usually one of a few activities. I go out for dinner with friends, or I go see a show, like maybe a comedy show, or next week I'm going to this, I think, hockey game, which is pretty exciting. And yeah, just do other stuff after work and then come back, go to sleep by hopefully 10:30. That seems like
Okay.
an average day.
Okay, since we are at it, like you mentioned, you do a lot of exercise. And I remember meeting you in
like Bangalore regions before COVID. And then I also met you in Dhaka region, and it looked like you lost a lot of weight over there. So, like, how much weight did you lose, and like, what are you doing to keep yourself fit most of the time?
Yeah, this is a very personal question, but I think I'm happy answering this. I lost about, I would say, like more than 100 pounds, which is basically like the way I did this was mostly do a lot more exercise. Also, to clarify, like a lot of that weight was gained during COVID, where I had personal reasons and I couldn't go out of my house. So exercise was extremely limited. Plus, my diet was not amazing. And a lot of the changes that come in are following a good diet, measuring your calories. That really tells you how much, what content you're eating every day, and it makes you more conscious of your food. And just, trying a lot of new sports because I know I'm a competitive person, and therefore I really prefer playing sports to doing something like cardio or running. Though I am doing more and more running because it also helps you in sports. So there's a, yeah.
And like recently,
But
you
I
had
think of it as
target of
running for sports.
like recently I saw on Twitter like you had a target of completing 5 kilometer walk in 30 minutes, and you were able to achieve that. So like that was a great thing. Like, do you have any plans to participate in any marathon or something like that?
Oh yeah, I've been very delinquent about it. My basically like the best 5 km I've done so far is maybe a little more than 24 minutes right now. But I have my knees aren't amazing because of like genetic reasons, and so I also push myself really hard, and I really want to, and I think I want to take a step back and make sure I'm in full physical shape before I decided to take on a marathon. But I do want to do one. It's just, I think I punish my body too much by pushing it too hard. And I'm kind of realizing that, that's not the best approach here. I think
Okay.
5Ks, 10Ks, yeah, are good. But marathons really require aftercare. They require you to do your stretches. You don't want lactic acid building up. And there are a lot of other considerations that you should keep in mind so that you don't injure yourself.
Okay, I wanted to move back to ICPC once. So, like, you have one ICPC Amritapuri regional in Bangalore, the one which happened before COVID. Then you also won
Uh-huh.
ICPC Gwalior regional, which was online. And like for the third time, you also participated in North America Championship, and you qualified for the Egypt World Finals again. So, like, how much challenging it was to qualify from North America regionals compared to Indian regionals?
I'd say this is a really hard question because know I've had different sets of teammates every time, and it's very hard for me to make a comparison because all of my teammates were good at different things, and it's I am playing a different role in every team, so maybe it's not the easiest comparison, but I think that North American regionals were actually a little easier for us because I would say in Indian regionals, this is not like a huge knock, but there is some randomness relatively because of the fact that the problem sets are not super well calibrated. Like there are a bunch of teams on the same problem, same number of problems, and our teams, like every time I've participated, I've had terrible penalty. So we have had to solve an extra problem to win and qualify. And if we didn't win, we were just not qualifying because we would have been 20th.
That looked like a
Uh,
personal attack because even this time
I'm
in the
sorry.
ICPC regionals in India, like in Kanpur regional, we had 9 problems, 3 of them were unsolved, and the winner team won by 1 problem. And like Chennai regional was completely different. Like the team at the top solved 5 problems from the 9, and there were 14 teams that solved the same number of problems. And Amritapuri regional was slightly a bit balanced, but you were right on the fact that most of the teams solve the same problems. Like there is no balances. Like some teams solve A B problems and other teams are solving C D problems. So yeah.
Right. And that made it like way harder because, you could have a bad day and miss a single problem, and that's it, you're out. Whereas in America, it felt like, I think by the 3.5 hour mark, I was about 90% sure we were qualifying. Whereas in India, I think both the times I participated and won until the last 3 minutes, I had no idea whether we were winning or not, or like even whether we were the best team from our college. I didn't even know that for until the last 3 minutes.
Like I remember those regionals. In the Bangalore regionals, you ended up solving two problems in the last hour, and then you were calculating with the other team from IIT Roorkee, like how many problems they have solved and what would be their approximate time penalty. And in Gwalior regional, you just solved one problem in the last 3 minutes to get at the top. So like I agree a bit on them. And like some people were asking like how to get referral at the firm you are working at right now.
I would say like this is a difference between, or at least in my opinion, this is a difference between quant firms and tech firms. Quant firms generally don't require referrals. This is my opinion, of course. Like it could be false, but from what I've seen so far, I have not asked for referrals at quant firms as much, just because they either they reply to you either way, pretty reasonably quickly. The recruiters are a lot more active. They reply quickly, they decide quickly, they move things forward. Whereas tech recruiting is a lot slower, and you need referrals to kind of get to the top of the queue, things like that.
Okay,
It feels a lot more meritocratic. Yeah.
I haven't really applied for any quant firm, but like to me it looked more like quant firm had like highly selective criteria. So like the number of people, it might be the case that number of people applying there are comparatively less compared to tech firms. So they might ended up looking at, like recruiter might ends up looking all the referrals they have got. And then because they have selective criteria, like they know who to interview for and who to just pass on.
I do think that they interview a lot of people, but I'm not sure. I don't have that much insight into how recruiting works, but it's just my experience that all the quant firms I've talked to, out of all the firms I've applied to, quant firms reply really quickly, and tech firms take forever to reply. And
I was just
referrals,
blindly
yeah,
guessing.
I've always gotten tech referrals, never quant referrals. So
And
that's my
any good
experience.
researchers to
And I also think quant
prepare.
referrals don't help as much.
Okay. And
Resources to prepare.
any good resources to prepare for upcoming quant internship. So like someone who is asking already has a quant internship and he just wants to prepare himself before his first bit. And then you can also say like some good resources you have used to give an interview for the conference.
I personally think I underprepared I extremely underprepared, which is probably the wrong direction. Or not extremely, but somewhat underprepared. I think there are different quant firms looking for different things, and there are different roles at quant firms. So it really depends. You should do a little bit of research. I can tell you how to do that research. So you can go to Glassdoor, check out interview questions, and that gives you some idea of what quant firms ask. And then you should figure out what's the best resource. Or you can go to, I don't know, like often quant firms have on their sites some rough idea of what they're looking for. But for example, just to give you a range, like for some quant firms, they asked me purely coding. For some quant firms, they asked me, like trading questions where you would have to participate in some games and decide what to do. And for some quant firms, I was even asked things like, system stuff, or like where does code memory live, things like that. So I was asked to build prediction models. I'm trying to remember all my interviews, and yeah, in some firm I was just asked a ton of C++, for example. And I'm not really good at extremely like low level details, things like programming languages. So yeah, it really depends on the quant firm, on the role. I've interviewed for like a variety of quant firms and roles. So I think for me, it's just been a huge model of things I've been asked. And I've just realized that the best thing to do is figure out what role you want, what quant firm you want to work at, and figure out what that looks like and go from there.
Okay, Nikhil is asking.
There just is no one size fits all.
Okay, Nikhil was asking about ICPC regions. Like, how much level should we have before we participate in the regions? Like, I guess what should be the average rating on codeforces to breeze through the regions?
I think the second part of the question is ill-formed. Your average rating on codeforces to breeze through regionals has to be like 2,500, I think, in India, just because there is some variance. And breeze through is kind of like a strong ask here. Maybe like 2,600. Then I could maybe say that, yeah, you're probably making world fine. I mean, you should participate
to
with whatever level.
in the chat. Like what Subham is saying is, if you are at least 2400, like you would most likely qualify. But to qualify there, you don't really need 2400. Like I believe, like during his first regionals, he was just master. Like their team was only masters, 3 people masters. Then
Yeah,
that's
like
what like,
just to be clear, like what this means is if you are an average of 2600s, then you're probably definitely qualifying, but you don't need to be that strong to qualify, to have a chance at qualifying. I think qualifying is not about CF rating as much as people like to think. Qualifying is a lot more about 3 people working together, especially when you're not 2600. And people really underestimate how important this part is.
so.
I
Like
think
that
teams,
was my next question as well. Like you had 6 different teammates in the 3 times you qualified for the World Finals. So, like, would you like to say emphasize on like how your team coordination was, and like what's the most essential skill required for the ICP?
right. I think there are a couple of things. First, you need to figure out what each person is good at and not good at, so that when you see a problem, you often know what kind of problem it is. And even if you like math, if you're looking to maximize your chances of winning, you can't say that, oh, this is math and I like it, so I want to do this. You know that someone else is like really good at math, so you give it to them. In my last team, we had a PhD student in math who was just really good. And even though I like math, and on like one of my previous teams, I was more of the math guy, a lot like mostly the math guy. In this team, I would just give it to him because I know that it's just more optimal that he does this. Even though I love doing it. So that's just how it works. And sometimes, when the problem is really hard, then both of us discuss it. But that's at the later stages of the competition. But yeah, that's just how it works. And the other part, like first, once you understand your team, you do enough team competitions and you know what each person is good at and bad at. The other part is about, I guess also in the first part, you have to come up with a plan because there might be things all 3 people are not good at. And you want 2 people out of 3 to have some comfort in each topic, I think. Probably for very strong teams, they have 3 by 3 comfort in most topics, but you can definitely qualify for World Finals without having that. And the second thing is about debugging. I think being able to read your teammates' code is an extremely important skill, an undervalued skill, and debugging faster is one of the main points of a 3 computer or a 3 person 1 computer contest. And people underestimate what a time sink that can be. Aryan can tell you, like in my 2020, like in my Dhaka World Finals, my team came 50th and Aryan's team came 49th. And my team had, I think, 7 problems solved on paper, but all 3 of us were debugging a different problem. And we hadn't seen each other, we hadn't practiced together for a very long time because I was in the US, they were like in different countries. And yeah, it was a disaster. We ended up like not getting any of the 3 problems because we were just not effective at debugging our own plus each other's code. We didn't have the 1 computer experience, things like that.
Since it was your aim, I was trying to remind you about the Dhaka World Finals. That
I
would
know.
definitely be the highlight when you see my AMA over there and my ICPC journey. So, yeah. And like one important question of the day is any valuable advice for beginners and grandmasters?
The same advice for both.
No, you can give different advice to both of them.
Oh, okay.
These are 2 different questions.
Valuable advice for beginners. I think don't get discouraged, be curious. Try to understand why something works and why it doesn't work. When you say that you're like, outputting a string, or I think can't remember, is C++ string dot s1 dot append s2 n square, and one of them is n. I keep forgetting which one.
So
I
like
think basically you're
plus
supposed to do s1
plus
plus equal to
equal
s2.
to is the length of the second string. And s equal to s, like there are two operations. One, you are using plus and equal to assignment sign.
Oh, right.
And one is
Yeah.
overloaded plus equal to sign. So like one of them is order and square. Like if like the main problem over there is if you append two strings, that's not a problem. The problem happens when you have to append n different characters over there.
Right. Anyway, there are things like this that you will encounter for sure, where someone will just tell you, oh, replace this with this and it works. But don't stop there. Like, try to figure out why that happened. And you'll figure out that, oh, it's because the complexity of this operation is like this, because this is the most sane way to implement this if you were building a language. And this other operation is much faster. So try to understand those like fundamental ideas. Those are a lot more important than remembering, oh, always do this or blanket rules. Be curious, ask questions, talk to people after you've tried questions yourself. Yeah. And you'll understand things better. For grandmasters, I don't know, you're already pretty good. Remember that CP is a hobby, I guess. Yeah, I hope you're having fun. I don't know. If you're asking for advice for ICPC specifically, or are you asking just life advice?
Like, you can also give an advice for ICPC as well. I hope. Like, you may end up redirecting it to your blog, which you wrote. Like, you wrote a series of blogs based on your ICPC experience and like what you would advise others. I can also add that inside.
Right. If you're a GM or better, I guess, then maybe I think being strong in a team and having good communication is just extremely important compared to, being individually better is of course useful, but being able to communicate with your teammates becomes increasingly important when you get to like strong levels, I think.
I saw a tweet on Twitter where you were challenging someone for the race to international grandmaster. Like, I believe the audience would like to know the current status of the challenge and like what are you doing over there?
This is a great question. Also, I saw that someone asked me on codeforces, how do you develop skill issue, which is, I guess, a very fair question to ask. To rephrase the question is, I was grandmaster before, and why am I candidate master now? I think the answer is okay. I can answer this. So when I first became grandmaster, I thought that I'm never going below. Like I am for sure, and if I go below, it's just going to be a transient thing. It's going to be like noise. But I kind of realized that there are two things happening. One, there are some amount of CP specific tricks that don't really translate outside of CP. And I've begun forgetting those, even though I used to like be on the lookout for them when I used to do CP. For example, the tournament graph trick that Aryan and me discussed in this one ICPC commentary thing. I remember that I've solved two problems using this and gained a lot of rating, and I've gotten to Grandmaster in one of those competitions because I just immediately knew, oh, this is just the tournament graph thing, and it immediately works. But this is just not that useful outside of CP, and so I don't remember them. And part B, I can still solve hard questions, but I can't code them up as fast because of two things. Like one, I'm not as fast at figuring things out in terms of what the exact functions are, and B, I'm trying to think more as a software developer also. So I end up refactoring my code in the middle of the contest, saying, "Oh, this looks ugly. I need to delete this." And this is probably really good for getting a lot better if I start practicing a lot more, because you'll notice that people who are really strong have great code management or something. They have simple functions. Their functions are well scoped. You can tell what it does just from looking at the name, the signature. That's how your function should be. But my CP functions were not like that. And I spent a lot of time refactoring those. So in the latest competition that I did, for example, I was able to solve a lot more problems than I ended up coding, but I'm washed. I can't do it that fast. Plus, I haven't gotten fast enough with writing good code. Yeah.
Like
that's how I developed skill issue.
On the rewriting part, because I see myself rewriting function a lot more times after I have started working as a software engineer compared to before. And like, okay, the one you want also wants to ask like, how many times did you get to use advanced algorithms like FFT, heavy light decomposition, generating functions, etc.?
I've gotten to use HLD sometimes in competition, I think, because the idea of HLD is maybe not like HLD as you know in its full form, but the ideas of HLD are pretty simple. And this has also come up in some regional. I remember discussing with Aryan before. Yeah, I think HLD itself is pretty useful, and you should learn the concepts behind it. FFT was in the World Finals, in the Dhaka World Finals. I just didn't get to that problem, I think. I think it was also in the Moscow World Finals, also in the Dhaka World Finals, and I knew how to do both of these problems. For the Moscow one, I definitely knew because I told someone the trick, but I couldn't get to that problem because, you know, yeah, we were working on other problems and we didn't have time to get there. So it could have been useful. We have solved problems with FFT before in Amrita Puri, I think, but my teammates ended up solving it, so I didn't need to look at it.
And like one question I wanted to ask was your internship experience at EPFL, and like how was your experience roaming around Europe in your second year internship?
It was really fun. I had not been outside of the country before then, or that's not fully true. Like I was outside of the country as a baby, but I hadn't been outside of the country since I was like 2 years old until I got an internship at EPFL. This was a result of a bet I made with my parents where I said I wouldn't go outside on their money because of some reasons. Anyway, I make a lot of stupid bets. So yeah, I finally got to go outside of the country, which was extremely exciting. I realized a lot of things about vacations that I am still like, inculcating in myself. For example, the first time I went outside, I kind of thought, oh, every weekend I'm going to go to a new country. Because in Europe, the Shenzhen area is really convenient and you can go to a new place every weekend. But now I think that's just not a good idea because you don't get to explore a culture as much when you're just there for like half a day or one day. You can see the touristy things, but a lot of vacation or going around new places is understanding how people there live and their culture, what traditions they follow, how their life looks like, how they think, the beauty of nature and nightlife, whatnot. There are a ton of things like the cuisine. Yeah. So it was very, how do I say it? Interesting because I was jumping country to country every other weekend. And EPFL itself was really nice. I think I learned a lot of things from the professor there. The students there are obviously amazing. My EPFL professor said to me one thing that I still remember. There was this algorithm that I was trying to present, and I was telling him, I think we can do better than this. I have an idea that will make us go down in complexity. And he said, sure, why don't you write it down on the board? And then I opened my paper to copy the algorithm down. And he said, no, can you do it from memory? And I said, no, because I don't remember the details. And he said, I think you should, like, when you're doing research like this, you should make sure to understand things inside out. And you should be able to reproduce the core parts of your, at least when you're doing it, like that research without looking at your sheet. And he said it to me in a very advisory way. And I think that really helped me in the longer term because I've realized that, when you know things inside out, it's a lot easier to talk to people. It's a lot easier to collaborate when you don't have to look up stuff. It's also just a lot better for your own understanding. I think you become a lot more productive. And yeah, that was probably like a big learning experience for me overall. So I would say it was a memorable internship. Yeah.
Like someone, Deves, is asking, is it possible to get internship doing candidate master?
I have sorry, I think Aryan might be a better person to ask than me because I think Aryan has a much better idea of how the job scene in India looks like if you want to do this in India compared to me because I have just not been that active.
Like I am not really updated with the current job situation because the last interview I have given anywhere was in 2000 21 this 2020 December when I gave for the current company I'm working at. So yeah, probably you might have. So like and answering to the question like, is it possible to get internship doing candid master? I would say don't tie yourself with your code forces rating. Like when I got my first internship, I did participated in less than 5 contests. So like it's more about like how you approach the company and what your goals are. Like my first internship was just a startup from my college alumni who just gave me the internship because I was a course topper in one of the classes there. So and I probably like although like a lot of people say like rating like core forces rating and all correlate to it, but like it is possible to get internships without having an account on core forces as well. Like I do know a few friends who ended up getting placed somewhere without that. And like one question, were you active in any clubs in the college? Like both IIT Bombay and Stanford?
In IIT Bombay, I don't think I was like extremely active in any club except I formed my own competitive programming group that some people joined and they were pretty excited about it. After I left, it kind of died out. So it was a transient thing, unfortunately. I did some ESL stuff, some more Indigo stuff. That was pretty fun. At Stanford, I was pretty active in badminton in the badminton club, and I used to go a couple times every week, plus on my own a couple times. So maybe like 4 times a week I used to play badminton for a lot of the time I was at Stanford. And I also did social dancing, which is extremely fun. Yeah, I think those two things are the things that I probably did clubs for. And apart from that, let's see. I think I tend to do a lot more one-off events than clubs. So I would join classes like piano or something. Yeah.
And like I remember like you started or like you were pretty active in Stanford ICPC club as well. So like how was
Oh
your
yeah,
experience
I
compared to
that was sorry, that just slipped my mind. Of course, the ICPC club. I think it was great. I think actually right now we're having the club selections today. So yeah, for this year's regional teams. So we're selecting the teams for that will represent us at regionals today potentially? Question mark? I think. Yeah,
like
which is pretty
it's a
exciting.
bit like ICPC in America is a bit different from in India. Like in India, people from team give an online contest and regional select team. While I believe in US, like even college can select different team from what teams have been selected, and like college has more authority and coach actively participates in deciding the best team for to represent them, right?
I think it's a bit dependent on how you want to do it. So kind of me and I mean basically our whole ICPC team, the Stanford ICPC team acted as co-coaches for the next year's ICPC. So we ended up doing this thing where we told people that we would select the top 18 people because we wanted to send 6 teams to regionals to get experience. So we ended up selecting top 18 people and then telling them to make teams among themselves, but giving them some guidance, because we knew what each person was good at, and we were giving them a little bit of guidance as to, oh, you're good at this, this person is good at this. Maybe you'll do well together because it's complementary. But of course, there is this whole thing of who gets along with each other, and so we wouldn't actually decide teams for them. We would like maybe, yeah. Um, and then we would just the other jobs were just holding some coaching sessions, giving advice, telling them how to read scoreboards. This is actually a very important skill. And then preparing, making sure there's a bus to pick us up to go to the regionals, things like that. It's a fun day trip. And then
It's
one team
only
from the regionals, or I guess, yeah, makes North American championships.
and I think North America Championship, like the experience there is similar to the World Finals. Like you have live commentary and everything, so
Yeah,
it's like World Finals. You live in a 5-star hotel there. And something. Probably let's hope one day in India, like we can have a similar experience. And like, do you think the exam structure outside India is better than Indian institutes?
exam structure.
Like he's probably talking about JEE, while in outside India, like you have college admissions based on a lot of different things over there.
Oh, interesting. If you're talking about JE versus holistic admissions, I think this is a harder question, and there's no easy answer because, like, given the scale of applicants in India and the resources we have, it's just not easy to do holistic admissions. And so you need some kind of metric. And so I don't know. JEE is not perfect, but it's not obviously bad, or it's not clear what the best solution here is. Whereas in the US, there are more resources, there are not as many people, and it's possible for people to interview everyone. So I think it works here. It doesn't work everywhere.
Thoughts on AI doing aesthetic and master level sheet problems?
Right. Sorry, what was the question?
Decent ChatGPT solving a 3,000 data code process problem. So
Oh.
what do you see in future?
What's my opinion? I don't know. I haven't actually looked at this very carefully, but one of my friends talked about or like posted something about leakage in the training data. I'm not really sure if there was leakage or not. I haven't looked at it too carefully, but I know that Pajane God on codeforces looks into this actively because he's very curious. And I think Chili also on Twitter said something to this effect. I can find that tweet, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
remember
sure if
looking at
those
that tweet of
results are.
Chili as well.
Yeah. I just don't feel super confident that this is like a real thing yet. But if it is, that's very exciting, I think.
Probably a last question, like, do quant companies as IITs have hard online assessment test or something like that? Like, did you apply it for quant companies when you were in IIT?
I did not. I had no idea I wanted to do a quant job when I was in IIT. My life has been an absolute ride. Like I have no idea what I'm going to do at any point. I thought I wanted to do a PhD after my second year. And my third year, I decided that, oh, maybe I want to do a master's. I went to my master's. I thought I wanted to do ML engineering. Yeah, it's just been a complete ride. It's been very fun though. So I have no idea how IIT quant companies hire.
So like, I missed out on this question, like the interview would have been incomplete without it. Like, what is your favorite manga series?
Oh, yeah, great question. I think the answer just has to be One Piece. There is no question about it. It's not the manga I would recommend someone to read because it's a commitment. But I'm telling you, it's the best piece of fiction ever written. This is a hot take, but you can write it down. I'm saying it right now. It's the best work of fiction that we have.
Have been finished so far. So thanks a lot, Shubham, for joining us. And like, we are mostly probably sometimes we were arch enemy and sometimes we were the best friend. Like in my competitive programming journey, like I enjoyed competing with Shubham a lot. Like the first time the challenge we had was like we bet against each other for who would be the master first, like which I ended up winning. Then the next bet we had was like who would be the grandmaster first, which Shubham ended up winning. And then out of nowhere, Shubham decided to bet me for the international grandmaster after the Dhaka World Finals, which although I accepted because I wanted Shubham to be an international grandmaster, but looks like he has abandoned it. And like Shubham would have been international grandmaster had it not been one unrated contest in between, I believe. Like you had a pretty high delta over there, and the contest ended up being unrated because of D1E problem or something like that. So
I think there was also this one that I tested, and I ended up solving like the second last problem in Div1. That was like a 3000, and I was a tester, so I couldn't really participate. Like in testing, I ended up solving that, and it would have also been a very high delta.
like
Yeah.
I also
But I mean,
remember
that's just variance.
I also remember you posted a
Oh,
meme
yeah.
where like bright eyes outside. You had more than 200 delta and you were red back then.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
so
Well,
like
I mean,
two
it
missed
happens, man.
opportunities, but yeah, that's all. So thanks a lot, Subham, for joining us. And I guess I will close now. And like thanks everyone in the chat for joining with us.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.